With that, Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I've been chugging this coffee all day in preparation. Let's do it.
All right. So fill in the blank. Blank needs to happen next season to validate Riley Leonard transferring to Notre Dame.
A playoff appearance needs to happen next season in order to validate Notre Dame getting Riley Leonard at starting quarterback. I think that is, with the expansion and given, what is coming back next season, the additions at the wide receiver, your defense is probably going to be, hopefully just as good. I think that you go out and make this move, and it is a playoff or bust type situation, in my opinion.
I completely agree. That is what this move is about. That is what the other moves that they've made already that we've talked about are about. It is about being a playoff team next year. Like you look at where Marcus Freeman is as a head coach, disappointing first season. This season I think at least to an extent has to be viewed as disappointing because of all of the expectations that came with going out and getting an experienced quarterback like Sam Hartman. They end up in the Sun Bowl, still in a bowl game. There is still at least a little bit of a hint of a silver lining. They've got a chance to win 10 games this season, but that would be a really nice springboard toward next year. If they can get that 10, and then with all these additions that they're making, starting with this, going out and getting another really experienced quarterback and a guy who can play the position, being in the playoff is where it is, especially now that they're expanding to 12. I think that has to be a realistic expectation for this team year in and year out going forward, with the playoff expanding to 12. And if they are not in the playoff next year with Riley Leonard and everything else, I think that it would be a major disappointment. So adding Riley Leonard says we plan on being in the playoffs next year, and that's what would validate this move. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and Joe brought this up in an earlier chat question, do you think we lose either Minchey or Angeli, is what Joe said. And my question is, scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that Riley Leonard, Steve Angeli, Kenny Minchey, and CJ Carr are all going to be in training camp with the Irish next August? Scale of 1 to 10.
I put this as a 4 out of 10. So I only think that there's about a 40% chance that this happens. I think Minchey is definitely there. I think Carr is definitely there. I think Leonard is definitely there. I think that the real question mark is Steve Angeli, and what he deems to be of priority, right? Like, does he go out and basically do the Drew Pine and say, hey, I think that I could be a starting quarterback at maybe a smaller, Division I around the country. I don't know exactly where that's at. Or does he stick it out and continue to develop and earn his degree? But I don't think that, and if they run an offense how I think they're going to, I just don't think Angeli really fits into it schematically as well. And I would say, in simplest terms, I think he's more of a Sam Hartman quarterback than he is a Riley Leonard quarterback. And if the offense is going to be changed around Riley Leonard, and then the incoming of Minchey and CJ Carr and Deuce Knight, those seem like more guys who are realistic to run kind of a dual threat type of offense. I just don't know how much Steve Angeli fits into that dual threat option. And so I think he's the guy who would be the guy to leave, essentially. So I'm going to put it at a 4 out of 10.
You're putting it at a 4. I'm giving it a 2.5. And again, we're talking about the confidence that all four of those guys, Leonard, Angeli, Minchey, and Carr, that all four will be in training camp with Notre Dame next August. I put it at a 2.5. I think Henry agrees with me, quite frankly. But, when we were leaving the Blue Gold game last spring, one of the other guys on the beat said, well, that's the last time we're going to see those three quarterbacks together again. And of course, he was talking about Hartman, Buckner, and Angeli. And it's funny because, it hadn't really had it crossed my mind that somebody could transfer, I guess, but I really hadn't even considered it that deeply, because the whole spring, everyone was just saying they were saying the right things. Tyler Buckner and the coaches, everyone, it was just, like the right talk, saying all the right things about competition and everything else. And then before you knew it, boom, Tyler Buckner was gone, and the plan was supposed to be you get Hartman for a year, then Tyler Buckner was going to, most likely be the starting quarterback this coming up year. So nothing surprises me anymore in the transfer portal world. At the end of the day, guys want to play. I wouldn't have necessarily thought that Drew Pine was going to leave when he did, but he did. So I will be pleasantly surprised if all of them are back next year, but I just because of, especially how things happened last year. And I realize everyone's a little bit different and kind of, the mentality that they have is a little bit different, but I would be shocked at the end of spring if we don't see some more movement. That's just kind of the world that we live in. And, between this and going back to what we were just talking about, Tom says, I just don't know how to forecast wins and losses for 2024 because of the huge portal turnover on every team. We just have to be patient to see what happens after the third or fourth week next year. And I mean, that's absolutely true as well. I mean, just like look at Colorado and all the, what everyone was saying about Colorado. And, they had one win last year and they completely overhauled their roster. And I think most people thought, probably would have been shocked if they even got to 2 wins. They got to 4. Is that a successful season? Well, probably in Prime's mind, there's some success. But I mean, again, like, how could anyone have any idea what to expect out of Colorado with the complete overhaul of that roster that they did? And it's going to be, you're not going to see teams make as big an overhaul as he did, but with thousands of guys in the portal, I mean, it's a fair point. It's hard to figure out, from going from one season to the next, just what it's going to look like. Like, how are you even going to pick bowl games based on all these portals and opt-outs and everything else that are going on? I'll take it that's your agreement with that. You're on mute.
Sorry. Can you put that comment back up there again, or is it lost forever in the abyss?
I think it's probably lost now. I can try to go back and find it. He said he just doesn't know what to make, how to pick. Here it is.
Oh, I know what I was going to get at. Sorry. I think when you start talking about Colorado, I think the number one thing is, when you have a lot of turnover in the transfer portal, you introduce a new coaching staff, you introduce new players, you introduce new schemes. You don't know how any of that's all going to look until there's film out there. And so like this was saying, and like you were saying, kind of have to wait for the dust to settle in the first couple of weeks, because I don't think it's truly indicative of who these teams are, because again, everyone, not only are those players and everything getting used to each other, but the rest of the country is getting used to them, right? Because again, you don't know what the players are going to look like. You don't know what that scheme is going to look like. And so until there's a couple games of film, that's when it becomes a little bit easier. So I do agree. I think you kind of wait to see, outside of the first couple of weeks, how things are going to settle.
Yep, for sure. So this year's Notre Dame scholarship receivers room, this is what it looked like coming into the season. Chris Tyree, Tobias Merriweather, Jaden Thomas, Deion Colsey, Matt Salerno, Jaden Greathouse, Braylon James, Rico Flores, and an injured KK Smith. As of now, next year's wide receivers room will be Bo Collins, Chris Mitchell, Jaden Thomas, Deion Colsey, Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison, Logan Saldana, Cam Williams, and Micah Gilbert. What's your confidence in this group compared to last year's group? Like which group do you have more confidence in? Like if you were just like, think about how you felt maybe kind of going into the season. Try to, if you can, take out what ended up happening, I guess.
Yeah.
Which one are you more confident in? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm more confident in next year's group, and that's not just optimism. I'll tell you why. Jaden Thomas, Deion Colsey, those guys cancel each other out because they're both coming back, right? And then you would hope that they would be better because some injuries limited. this year. Jaden Greathouse cancels out with Jaden Greathouse, but you would expect in year 2 that he would be better than he was in year 1. I think that, you can have similar hype and anticipation with Cam Williams like you did with Rico Flores. Obviously, Rico Flores had game experience, so you're losing out on that. And I think Jordan Faison kind of becomes the new Chris Tyree. And then Chris Mitchell is the Chris Tyree that we thought we were going to get last season. He is the proven production type of player that Chris Tyree was, a fast slot guy. I think that I'm more confident about this year because Chris Mitchell is proven. We thought we had an idea of what Chris Tyree could be, but Chris Tyree hadn't proven anything yet. Chris Mitchell has proven it, and he's played.
And Tobias Merriweather had neither.
Right, and he's potentially playing, you could say he played on a worse team as well. And so if you're introduced to a better quarterback, a better system, etc., you would hope that Chris Mitchell would get better. So that's where I am on that. And then in terms of Collins, I think Collins is a proven Tobias Merriweather at the end of the day. And so you have two guys who are really proven, and now you're bringing back guys who are, have experience that were injured. You have Jaden Greathouse, who benefited from getting a lot of playing time early due to injuries, and et cetera. And so I feel like the number one thing that gives me more confidence about next season is we had anticipatory thoughts of who we thought, Tobias Merriweather would be, who we thought Chris Tyree would be. But at the end of the day, I feel like Collins is who we want Tobias to be, and Mitchell is who we thought Tyree was going to be. And so you introduce potentially a better quarterback, a better team, a better offensive line. I think that would give you more confidence at the end of the day.
Yeah, if I'm going to make a pro analogy, and I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, you're basically trading Tyree, Tobias, Braylon James, Rico Flores for Bo Collins and Chris Mitchell, and then you went out and signed some undrafted free agent, in Jordan Faison, and then you draft 3 stud rookies in Saldana, Williams, and Gilbert, all of them 4-star guys. So you are like Collins and Mitchell combined for 102 receptions in over 1,600 yards and 10 touchdowns. The 4 guys you gave up in this hypothetical analogous trade or metaphorical trade, they've got high upside, but they combined for just 68 catches and a little over 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. So you're trading future upside for proven track records. And again, going back to kind of the theme of what we've talked about throughout this show, by some of these, but by getting Riley Leonard and these receivers, you're trading future upside for right now. And you're hoping also, like, one of the sort of X factors in this whole thing is you also got rid of the position coach and you're bringing in a new position coach, and you're banking that makes a big impact as well. So it stinks that you had to lose some young talent, but they lost a guy going into year 3 that had 15 career catches in his first 2 years, and they, again, made moves to win now. And I'm much more confident as well in this 24 group that they're going to have next year. But at the same time, they still do have to go out and produce. We kind of got to see it now. And that's what we've been waiting for a couple of years.
Now we just get to talk about it for 6 more months.
9 more months. So Zeke Correll announced that he's going to transfer to North Carolina State, and Braylon James is going to TCU. Speaking of the transfers, what do you think about these moves?
I never understood Zeke Correll transferring. And I only say that because he's a first-year grad student, and so I guess his thought process would be, okay, I finished my time at Notre Dame, I have my degree, it's time to potentially move on as a grad transfer. And I guess I don't know what he's looking to fulfill, because I feel like at Notre Dame he had a better chance of maybe proving who he is or getting a better NFL grade, because Notre Dame is known for really good offensive linemen. And so I felt like if that's the goal, that he had a better chance at Notre Dame. And to me, the only thing that could potentially, warrant a transfer is he nervous about what is coming behind him, right? Has he hit his ceiling in terms of talent wise? And was he a guy out there because of hard work, knowing, where he was supposed to be and how to navigate the rest of his offensive linemen? but has it gotten to the point in practice, or, did the coaches have a conversation with him potentially of, hey, this guy might be moving ahead of you, in coming years,
Some of those
whatever it might
postseason
be.
conversations, like, was there a mutual agreement potentially that, hey, it might be best to move on, that kind of
And
thing.
I think that is the honest conversation that he must have had, because again, I don't feel like you're in a better chance or better position at NC State compared to Notre Dame. And so I feel like the move was strategically done because he was going to get passed up and likely wasn't going to be a starter next year. Braylon James, hard to really comment about his because we didn't really get to see him play, but he's going to TCU. So it makes me feel like he wants to get back home because he
Going
is
closer to
from
home.
Texas. So
Yep.
that would be, on the outside observations on both of those guys. One would be better chance to play. And then the other one would be, again, going closer to home.
Yeah. I mean, NC State had a big exodus of their own when the portal opened last week. They lost 15 guys on the first day, and Correll's going to go in, and like you said, he's going to have a chance to keep playing, and that's what you do wonder, like, how much those private conversations, the postseason conversation, like how much that came into play. And TD4ND was saying something about the offensive line coach, and look, I think that next year is going to be just as important for Joe Rudolph as this year was for Al Washington. Like, there were not major issues with this offensive line. They were good at times, but just like the quarterback and the team as a whole, how did they stack up against the better competition? That's where they kind of left some things to be desired. I think there is definitely like Joe Rudolph, especially because he is going to have a completely, revamped, overhauled offensive line next year. There's going to be a lot for Joe Rudolph to show, and I think it's going to be, like I said, just as important for him as this season was for Al Washington, because Al Washington really showed himself this year with the way that defensive line developed over the course of the season. I think people feel, or at least they should feel, a lot differently about him than they were probably feeling coming into the season.
Yeah, in terms of offense, huge years for Jared Parker and Joe Rudolph. I think a lot will say, depending on their success will be, and I know that's easy to say, but a lot of this team's success, I think, is predicated around what those two can accomplish on offense.
Yeah. So former Notre Dame soccer player Brandon Aubrey is now the kicker for the Dallas Cowboys. He kicked field goals of 59 and 60 yards Sunday night against the Eagles to become the first kicker in NFL history to kick 2 field goals of 59 plus yards in the same game. And now I've seen some rumblings about people like, why didn't Brandon Aubrey ever kick when he was with the Notre Dame football team? Well, it's interesting, Jess, because just before this show started, Brandon Aubrey was on the Dan Patrick Show.
Yes, he was.
Did you see this clip?
I caught bits and pieces of it. I think I know what you're referencing.
So here is Dan Patrick asking Brandon Aubrey, the former Notre Dame soccer player, current Dallas Cowboys kicker, that very question.
Went to Notre Dame. Did you think about kicking for the football team?
No, not once. Never crossed my mind.
So what do you think about all this, Jess?
Well, first of all, I think it's like very Jerry Jones to find the kicker off the streets that no one's heard of and just be completely willing to roll the dice on him. And so I think that's very cool, honestly, first of all, for the Cowboys. But, I mean, it's so hindsight and easy to say, like, oh, why wasn't he kicking at Notre Dame? The man was on a full scholarship on a national championship program at Notre Dame and playing men's soccer. Like, it's not like the football team just walks over to soccer practice and has open tryouts for all these kickers and
for
says,
every
hey,
soccer player. Yeah.
Right. And so, honestly, he got to this guy also made it into the MLS, right? And so the dream or thought was never about football. It was his own dream and soccer. And so once that dream kind of finally came to an end, I think he wanted to find a way to continue his career as a professional athlete. And if you go back and listen to the Dan Patrick clip, his, I think, girlfriend or wife is the one who was like, hey, why don't you give kicking a try if you don't?
Here's the thing with Brandon Aubrey. He's from Plano, Texas, which is right, near Dallas. he didn't play high school football. He was not a kicker in high school. He was just a soccer player. He played soccer at Notre Dame from 2013 to 2017. He had never played football. So he finishes Notre Dame. He's drafted by the MLS. He plays for a couple years, and then he gets cut, and he's got a Notre Dame degree. He decides he's going to be a software engineer. So one day in 2019, him and his wife are sitting on the couch watching an NFL game, and a kicker misses a field goal, and his wife is like, "You could do that." And so the next thing you know, he starts working with this former Mississippi State kicker, and like he literally was doing this for 2 or 3 years, working with this, kicker specialist. This is not even being on a football team. And then he tries out for the USFL. He does pretty well with the Birmingham Stallions for a couple of years, and he turns that into an NFL career. So there's no possible way that Brian Kelly or anyone else could have had any inkling, because Brandon Aubrey didn't even have any inkling that he could turn into what he is right now.
Well, that, and it's just, again, I see more people being like, oh, like you have to go over there and look around. But it's just like they're already recruiting field goal kickers as is. And so it's like, if you're recruiting and developing guys as is, what thought process would you be like, hey, let's walk over to the soccer field and find guys that have never kicked before? You don't just find a kicker. Like you said, it took him 2-3 years of practice under tutelage of someone else.
He began this process of becoming a kicker in 2019. So it's 4 years. And again, he had not been a football kicker before then. It took him 2 years, I think, like 2.5 years to get the tryout with the USFL. And then, kicked for a couple years with the USFL, and then went to training camp with the Cowboys this year and kept a roster spot. So but D-Rock Irish is saying, keep looking from within. The problem with that, D-Rock, is Brandon Aubrey would not have been equipped to become that when he was at Notre Dame, because he had never been a football kicker before. Like, he would have been, like, for him, it probably would have taken him, like if he started it as a freshman, it would have taken him until his senior year, until he was actually ready to go out and kick, most likely. Like, he was a project, and he spent all of his own time getting to the point that he is right now. So, you probably could have gone out and held tryouts with a soccer team or something like that. But even Brandon Aubrey, like I said, he didn't even know back then that he was going to turn into what he's turned into.
Well, and look at the roster back when he was here. He was here from 2013 to 2016. I'm pretty sure that's the Berenza and like Yoon era. Like, they didn't have issues kicking the ball. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Those weren't issues. And so again, I don't think that you just willy-nilly go out and be like, let's see who could potentially be the fourth string kicker for us today. I don't think it's a thought that ever came to mind.
I don't either. So Brandon Aubrey has made all 30 of his field goal attempts this season. And there was actually an article that I saw today from Lawrence Tynes, who Michael Hahn is probably familiar with, former New York Giants kicker, who says he thinks it would be good for Aubrey if he missed a field goal in the regular season before the playoffs. Do you buy or sell that?
I sell that. There's no reason to miss. He's missed extra points. I don't think that it's like this, you need to handle the adversity of missing or whatever, or potentially I don't think the man feels pressure. He hit like basically 2 60-yarders that looked like they were going to be good from 70. Like they were right down the middle. The guy has a boot on him. And I say that if he misses now, it actually gets him second guessing more, right?
He's in his head even more.
Yeah, he's in his head. I'm more so leaning towards just stay hot as humanly possible, because he's missed the extra points before, right? And as long as he keeps making the field goals, that's really all I care about. So I'm just going to sell this, because to me, like any hitter, you just got to stay hot for as long as possible. And when you get in a slump, and you deal with slumps when you're in a slump. You don't prepare for a slump beforehand. Again, you just stay hot as long as you can.
Yeah, this is a little bit like, like when the March Madness is approaching and you've got an undefeated team going in, and people start saying, well, they'd be better off if they lost a game before the tournament, get it out of your system and that kind of thing. I do think, though, I get what you're saying. He's missed some extra points. He's missed actually, what is it, 4 extra points that I think that he's missed this season, which, is crazy considering he's out there banging 60-yard field goals and he's missing extra points. But, do you think there's something to, like, the longer a streak like this lasts, the more momentum that story gains and people start talking about it,
So
and
more
it becomes more of a talking. But yeah, so like naturally the pressure builds. Like, I know you're not old enough to remember this, but back in 98, Gary Anderson was the kicker for the Minnesota Vikings, didn't miss a field goal all season. They get to the NFC Championship game. The game is on the line. Guess what happens? Misses a game-winning field goal. The Falcons go to the Super Bowl instead of the Vikings. So, like, I don't know. Like, the fact that he's missed some extra points, maybe, I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. Like, he has actually missed. He just hasn't missed the field goals. But, like, it just feels to me like if you were to miss, then it doesn't become this pressure point once the postseason gets here. I can see it.
Yeah, like I see both sides of the conversation, but I'm sure that everyone in Aubrey himself isn't really thinking about the streak. He's just thinking about, I need to make this field goal for my team, in this moment type situation.
Sure. So Pat McAfee announced last week that he'll return to ESPN's College Game Day next year. He's acknowledged reading social media criticisms and hearing his haters. Here's a quote from him. Quote, "I'm back. I don't love it. I don't love that my life is just going to continue to have people telling me to run into oncoming traffic, swallow a barrel," end quote. So what do you think, Jess?
So when I first read it, he said, "I'm back and I don't love it." I thought he was saying, "I don't love it" in reference to being back, but really it's in reference to all the fans and how he's treated, on social media. And I think, unfortunately, that's the era and the time that we live in is everyone's got a stage and everyone thinks that their voice needs to be heard and that it's the most important, thing to be heard. And quite honestly, if I'm Pat McAfee, throw on the blinders, bro. Like, don't read the social media stuff. Like, I get it. It's part of your job to kind of be on social media, but I still think there's ways you can navigate it without reading it. You do a good job. Your coworkers and your boss know you do a good job. And I would say that majority of the world appreciates him and loves him for what he does on that show. I mean, I do. I think he's been a great, addition and brings a different perspective and just the whole the way the dynamic. And to me, he's like a young Lee Corso that is bringing energy back into this show. And so I think you have to, if you're Pat McAfee, you need to look at all the benefits and just tune out and block all of the haters. And it's like, dude, you were a professional athlete. You were a kicker. Like
Right.
These things have existed in your life for as long as probably
You've never been
were a college
criticized
kicker.
before. It does seem weird, that like he's so attuned to all this criticism. But like K-Max says, they'll hate watch anyway, and that's
right. They'll watch just so they can send off some stupid tweet.
Yeah, and because Pat McAfee is to College Game Day what Notre Dame is to college football. He's polarizing. Polarization sells. 45% tune in to see Notre Dame win, 45% tune in to see him lose, and the other 10% live in Alaska. So it's the same with Pat McAfee. He's polarizing, but it sells. It's the same reason that, the guy whose last name starts with Cow still has a job, because he's polarizing as well. Love him, like Mark May. Do you remember Mark May? Like, are you?
Oh yeah, I
remember the whole Mark May phenomenon. I mean, he was polarizing too, but people watched. Lee Corso was polarizing when he was at his peak. ESPN just released today. It's funny, like that we were going to talk about this, and again, like within an hour before the show started, ESPN released their viewership numbers for the season. Guess what? They had their second most watched season in 12 years. So, like, I'm not saying they're all tuning in for McAfee, but people are watching the show more now. Like, people are saying they hate him. But I agree with what you're saying. It's just like, stop looking at the social media, because no one's going to get on social media and tell you how great you are. They're only going to come at you with the negative stuff. So just put the social media away and quit looking at it and cash your checks. That's what it comes down to, because I'm sure they're pretty nice ones.
Brent wants to know who gets the number 1 seed in the NFC. Come on, Brent. I know you're a 49ers fan. That's who's
Man.
getting it.
This is what happens when you get Niners fans jumping in, right?
And he started the show late, so he's not even going to hear this until the very tail end. Unfortunate.
The problem is the way the schedules shape up, it just like it favors the 40. It favors the Eagles, but it favors the 49ers as well because obviously they have the head-to-head against both the Cowboys and the Eagles. So if I had to guess, 49ers are going to get the number 1 seed. The Eagles are going to win the division, and the Cowboys will have the top wild card spot. They'll have to go to probably Tampa Bay to open up the playoffs.
That's what I am also anticipating.
Yeah, Tom, another good one. Paul Feinbaum, most polarizing. He's right up there as well. I don't know why I didn't think about him. But you're absolutely right. Yeah, so that's my pick, unfortunately, because I mean, the way it is weird, how different these schedules are in the month of December when you look at degree of difficulty for some teams compared to others.
Like the Eagles just got through their gauntlet and now has an easier portion, and the Cowboys are more so ending kind of with their gauntlet. They still have the Bills, the Lions, and the Dolphins before the season ends.
Yeah. Yep. That's right.
Well, and I just think, that the Cowboys just didn't do themselves any favors. I was telling you this the other night. I think the Cowboys have truly been outplayed in one game, and it's inexcusable they lost to Arizona, and it's inexcusable they lost that first game to Philadelphia, and it's had they won those games, even if they lost head-to-head to the 49ers, they're still probably in the driver's seat for the number 1 seed in the NFC.
Yeah. Lloyd says, what's wrong with his Lions? It would help if, they could take care of the ball a little bit better, I think. That would help them quite a bit. They might find themselves in the same position that the Rams were in a couple of years ago when they made the move to send Goff to Detroit. That could be the next move there for the Lions.
Brent says, how do you stop Brock Purdy? Brent, I'm going to have to break some news to you. I don't think Brock Purdy's a top 10 quarterback in this league. I think he's got a Deebo Samuel. He's got a Christian McCaffrey. He's got a Brandon Ayuk. He's got a George Kittle. He's got a Trent Williams. Like, I can keep going down the list. He doesn't do the work. The cast around him does the work. He just
Trent Williams said he's not a system quarterback. Like, what do you?
Yeah. Also, when Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel were out, that's when they went on their 2 to 3 game losing skid. I don't think those things are coincidental at all.
True.
I mean, Deebo Samuel is a yak king. Just get him the ball, and he does all the work afterwards.
No, that's true. And I've kind of always when the system quarterback argument comes up, I've always thought that every quarterback is ultimately a product of their system, both good and bad. Like you have a good system, you're probably going to be a pretty good quarterback. You have a bad system, it's going to go the other way into the supporting cast as well. When you've got guys around you, that changes things quite a bit. Like this is really the first time Jalen Hurts, like this little stretch that he's in right now. This is the first time he's had to really go through any turmoil of his own. And, a big part of that is teams the last couple of games have figured out a way to kind of put the clamps down on A.J. Brown. How are they going to respond to that? How are they going to, like they put the Cowboys put some pressure. I
love that Gilmore matchup.
Cowboys put some pressure on Jalen Hurts like he hasn't seen pressure before. That affected him quite a bit. They weren't able to just do their tush-push thing all the time. That affected them quite a bit, So how are they going to respond? Hey, I'm actually, with this Italian up there in New York, DeVito, like I'm actually they played some close games against both the against the Commanders and the Giants, if I remember right, the first time they played. So
just not the Cowboys.
I don't think you can write either one of those off. At least I hope not anyway. All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate you joining us once again this evening, talking about the big Riley Leonard news and all that comes with it. We will, I'm sure, have much more coming up over the course of this week to talk about, because there's a lot more news that we're kind of expecting is going to continue to be announced as this week goes on. So we'll have it for you. Jess, appreciate you as well coming on at the end of a busy day doing your own work. So
I do what I can. I was only like 5 minutes late, so I hope it wasn't held against me. And we got to appreciate Vince for being on short notice.
Yep. Thanks to Vince for jumping in for a little bit as well, even if he had to yell at the kids in the meantime.
DK, I will see you at Collision Bend, tomorrow, ? You missed it, but that's like a brewery like 10 minutes from my house, not even like 5-10 minutes. And he said he's going to be there tomorrow and there's drinks free if I decide to show up.
Yep. Michael has thrown this RJ Oben crystal ball in there a couple times. Yeah, you're right. He's got a crystal ball from 24/7. And Riley Leonard had a crystal ball over the weekend from 24/7, I think, as well. And that worked out. So we'll see what happens with RJ Oben, the Duke defensive end. Hit the like button on your way out. And, of course, subscribe, rate, and review. We do appreciate it on your podcast platforms. Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight and for all the great stuff. We will talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.